welcome to this webinar, our first webinar on scientific writing. So today, Dawin SICHIMBA is going to be presenting on abstract and keywords. But before you go to the presentation, we'd like to introduce the panelists. So, my name is Zolo Ivan. I'm the president of the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons, and you are all welcome to this webinar. So, you move next to Gideon. Please, Gideon, can you unmute yourself and present yourself? Okay. Gideon says he's currently in the library, so he can't speak. All right. No problem, Gideon. You're welcome. So, Defo, next is Defo. Defo, please, can you unmute yourself and present yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm called Genolin Defo. I'm medical student, FHS Boya, level 5. I'm in Cameroon.
Thank you so much. Next is Mutale. Please, Mutale, can you unmute yourself and present yourself? You have difficulties getting you, Mutale, but if you can type your name and your affiliation in the chat room, I'm going to read it later on. Thank you so much. Next is Ezekiel. Please, Ezekiel, can you unmute yourself and present yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I am Olaoluwa Ezekiel Dada. I am a second-year medical student from the University of Ibadan. I'm a member of AFAN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ezekiel. Next is Takutsin Bejo. Please, can you unmute yourself and present yourself?
Greetings, everyone. I'm Takutsin Dogmo Bejo, senior medical student from the University of Boya, Cameroon.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Tutuan. Please, can you unmute yourself and present yourself?
Hello, I'm Dr. Tutuan, medical doctor in Cameroon. I practice at Bingo Baptist Hospital and share Magdalene, Kano.
All right. Next is Dr. Oric. Please, Dr. Oric, can you present yourself?
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Oric Sidney. I'm the former president of the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. Nice to have you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Oric. And last but not least is myself. As I already said, I'm Zolo Ivan. I'm the final year medical student from the University of Boya in Cameroon. And I'm the current president of the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. It's a pleasure to have you all. So we move straight to Dawin. Dawin, you have the floor. Present yourself and give your presentation. Thank you.
So my name is Dawin SICHIMBA. I'm a fifth-year medical student from the Copperbelt University School of Medicine in Zambia. I'm the current director of operations for the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. So today we are starting a scientific writing course, and I'm privileged to give the first presentation, or rather the first topic of the course, which is title, abstract, and keywords. So I'll go straight into my presentation. So this is basically the layout. So we have the introduction, the general structure of a manuscript, and sequence of writing a manuscript. Even though these are not basically, or rather typically concerning the topic for today, but it being the first topic of the course, I would want to highlight a few things on the general structure and sequence of writing a manuscript. Then from there, we'll go into the main business, which is the title, abstract, and the keywords. So down there, I've indicated that the introduction and conclusion are not really referring to those of the manuscript, but they're referring to this. All right, so when we look at manuscript writing, okay, so formally, most of the times we find that even in various institutions, during the period of study, let's say for undergraduate level, for example, most of the times there's less emphasis on manuscript writing, okay? So it means that there's something that has to be done for any particular person to develop this art of manuscript writing. So this is why even as the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons, it is very important actually to have such a course so that we look at manuscript writing. So it is an art that needs to be developed, meaning that the more you do it, the better you become. Okay? The more you read those that have been written by others, the better you become. Okay, so like I mentioned, there is little preparation for manuscript writing, right? So we need to go more like an extra mile. Any person who's interested in research and manuscript writing needs to go an extra mile in order for them to attain the best of the art of manuscript writing. So In this particular topic, we want to look at the title, the abstract, and the keywords. Now, the title gives the first impression, the initial impression. Now, there's a saying which goes by, you can never have a second chance to give the first impression. Meaning that first impression is a once-off thing. Okay, it's a once-off thing. Meaning that when you look at the title, the moment someone looks at the title of your manuscript, they should have the first impression, okay, of what they're about to encounter in that particular manuscript. So it is also described, or rather related to be like a hat on a head, okay, or the front door to a house. So you find that when you look at the hat or the on the head or the front door of a house, it is going to give you probably the first impression of what you're going to find in that house. So now, briefly looking at the abstract is simply the summary of what you have in your manuscript. So one, it is supposed to be self-contained. We'll discuss further on the abstract. It is supposed to be short and a powerful statement. Then other than that, we always need to refer to the specific peer-reviewed journals guidelines for authors. So now, what we're trying to say here is that different peer-reviewed journals, they have different guidelines. So for anyone to be able to, if you are intending to submit your manuscript for publication, okay, to a peer review journal, you always need to refer to their guidelines. You always need to, if you're not so sure about the guidelines, or rather about what exactly to do, or the layout of the manuscript, for example, you can contact the particular peer review journal that you want to publish your manuscript with. Okay, so let's look at the general structure of a manuscript. So the general structure of a manuscript, first we're going to have the title, the abstract, keywords. Okay, then from there we move on to introduction, the methods, then the results and discussion, then conclusion. Then further on we have acknowledgements, references, and other supporting materials. Now, for purposes of this presentation, we're concentrating on the first two, which is the title, the abstract, and the keywords, and we endeavor to see how exactly we can write this in a better way. So now let's look at the sequence of manuscript writing. Now, remember from the previous slide, even though we have this layout of a manuscript, okay, so we have the title first, the abstract, the keywords, and so on in that order. So that is the order in which they come in a manuscript. However, it does not necessarily mean this is the order in which they are written. All right. So let's look at the sequence of writing a manuscript. So let's look at it in that format. So most of the times, what may be included first, what may be written first is are the figures and the tables. Okay. So those are going to show some of the findings of your research, what you found when you did your research, the qualitative and the quantitative information that you found. So from there, we're going to have, you write the materials or the methods, the results, and the discussion, okay? So after the figures and the tables, which are showing you the qualitative or quantitative data that you came up with, you now go ahead to write the methods, the materials, the results, and the discussions, okay? So these are some of the general, or rather the most common recommendation when it comes to the sequence of writing a manuscript. Then from there we have the conclusion and the introduction, okay? You write the introduction and the conclusion. Then lastly, so we can see that even though the title, the abstract, and the keywords are coming first in the general structure of the manuscript, they are usually written last in the manuscript, right? Because whenever you're writing, even when it comes to the title, most of the times you may need to refer back to the entire manuscript for you to be able to come up with the appropriate title. Same with the abstract. Remember, I mentioned earlier on to say that the abstract is like a summary of the manuscript. Okay, so you cannot summarize something that you've not yet written. So most of the times, the abstract is written last. Even the keywords, you get the keywords from the entire manuscript, and then you put them up. So let's look at the title. So remember, I mentioned that the title gives the first impression, okay, of the manuscript, meaning that it is very important. It is going to attract the readers, not only the readers, but also the editors and the reviewers' interest. One, other than just that, first we need to know that the title, other than just giving the subject of the manuscript, okay, or of the research, it also attracts the reader's interest, the prospective reader's interest to read that particular manuscript. So you find most of the times, I'm sure it has happened to most of us before, where you just look at the title of the manuscript, already you are interested, okay? You just want to read the whole manuscript. So that is one of the intents, or rather the goals of writing a good title. Then it is supposed to be something and informative, all right? So we don't have to write too many words, but we need to be straight to the point. We need to be, the title needs to be as informative as possible, okay? It is going to give more like the general ideas of the manuscript. Now, other than that, we should also understand that the title reflects the content of the manuscript. I think I've already mentioned that. It reflects the content of the manuscript. So once you look at the title, you are probably even able to anticipate some of the things that you're going to see, but it becomes even more interesting. Someone gets interested in reading your manuscript. Now, one error that we are not supposed to make is making the title rely on technical jargon. Now, why is this important? It is important to make sure that the title does not rely on technical jargon, basically because if you submit your manuscript to a peer-reviewed journal for publication, all right, the reviewers, probably including the editor, they may not be of the same field as you are. So, for example, in our case, okay, we have neurosurgeons and aspiring neurosurgeons. So you find that most of the manuscripts that are going to write, they are going to be about neurosurgery. Now, when you submit that manuscript to a peer-reviewed journal, it does not mean that the people that are going to review and edit your manuscript are also neurosurgeons or probably aspiring neurosurgeons. They may be of a totally different field. So this is why it becomes important, so that even those they are able to get the general concept of the manuscript from the title. Okay, they don't have to struggle to understand what the manuscript is all about. So they should also gain the interest by making sure that the title is not relying on the technical jargon. All right. So let's look at an example of a title. So let's say plasma exchange in acute Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, a case series. So when you look at this, it's like almost every word except the adjectives, the prepositions, and the articles in this title. Everything else is technical jargon. Okay, someone who's not of the medical field cannot easily understand what you're talking about, what the manuscript is all about. All right. So let's compare it with a title such as this one. So we say an alternative schedule of plasma exchange therapy results in improved outcomes of patients who present with severe Guillain-Barré syndrome. So you find that in this case, it is presenting the manuscript in an interesting manner. Okay. Other than that, it is also giving this as an alternative. In other words, it is giving the plasma exchange therapy as an alternative to what is already known or what is usually done, okay, for patients who present with acute or rather severe Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, so which of these would you rather go for? So we should see that the first title here, it is much more relying on technical jargon, while the second title is so much supported by non-technical jargon. Okay, so the first title may not be so appropriate to use, but rather we may go for the second title. The title should also offer claims that are upheld by the data to be presented. Okay, so now we may want to also look at more like the components of the title. So what are some of the components of a good title? Some of the components of a good title, you find that it will include some of the demographic information. Okay, for example, we may need to make sure that we have maybe the study setting. Okay, the study setting is included. The methods that were used may be included. The kind of population that was used may be included in the title. All right. So all those are going to give the title. They are going to make the title to be better. All right. So then most of the times we find that on the title is usually on a separate page. Okay, or they may be on the same page as the abstract or so. However, on the same page, we find that we may also want to include the affiliations. Now, these affiliations, we are talking about the names of the authors. Now, here, I should mention that we need to always refer to the author's guidelines for that particular peer-reviewed journal that we are submitting our manuscript to. Okay, so some of the peer-reviewed journals, they may require that on the names you just maybe include maybe the one name and probably the initials of other names. Okay, for example, I'm Dawin SICHIMBA, I may just write this chamber. Others may recommend that. Then we may also include things such as the appropriate titles. Okay, and qualifications. So others you may put the PhD, the MD, and so on, depending on the peer-reviewed journal that you're submitting your manuscript to. So we always need to consult them. Other than the names, you may also need to include the department and the institution where you belong. Okay, if you're a medical student like myself, you include a medical student at such and such an institution. If I'm part of Association of Future African Neurosurgeons, I include the department where I belong and the institution. Okay, so even that there's always need to consult the peer review journal guidelines for authors. Now, once we write the title, usually a good title, okay, we find that a good title may only be as long as about 10 to 12 words. Okay, 10 to 12 words is going to be sufficient for a title. All right. To put it all, you find that sometimes we may say it may have about 100 characters. That is the letters, including the punctuation marks. Okay. Sometimes if you include the spaces, you find that a good title should, on maximum, should go up to about 120 characters, including spaces. Okay. So in other words, you don't have to make the title to be a whole lot paragraph. It should be as short as possible, straight to the point, and very interesting. Okay. Now, we have what is called the running head. So at the bottom of the manuscript, at the bottom of the first page or the title page, we may also include what is called the running head. Okay. So the running head, I can simply put it as the summary of the title. For example, in this case, look at the example that we had. Okay. So I said that an alternative schedule of plasma exchange therapy results in improved outcomes of patients who present with severe Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay. Then all this can be summarized as a treatment schedule for Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, so that is going to be the running head, and it may be included at the bottom of the title page. So let's look at the abstract. So the abstract, just like we mentioned on the title, it also gives a good impression. It also gives the first impression, okay, about the manuscript that you are presenting. So it is supposed to be short. It is not supposed to be too long. So there is a word limit. So for example, the Journal of Clinical Apheresis recommends that for an unstructured abstract, okay, I'll show an example of an unstructured abstract and a structured abstract. Okay, so unstructured abstract is more like a one paragraph kind of abstract. Okay, so the Journal of Clinical Apheresis recommends that in such a situation, such kind of an abstract is supposed to have not more than 120 words. Okay, but if we have a structured abstract, then it can have about 250 words. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of a good abstract? A good abstract is supposed to be focused. Okay, it is supposed to be focused on the main findings. So what was done? What was done in this in the research in the manuscript, and what were the important findings? So those are the things that are supposed to be mainly to be indicated in the abstract. Then it is supposed to be accurate and short descriptive of the work. All right. So you may not need to include, for example, if you include the results, when you include the results of your research, you're supposed to go straight to the results, but you need to minimize the experimental finding, the experimental details. So you could have done quite a number of experiments. You could have done a lot of things to come up with the results that you had. However, you don't need to include all those details of your methods, of your experiments. You don't need to include all those. What is very important is to indicate basically just the method, summarized, and then you indicate the key results of your research. Okay, so always remember to indicate, or rather to include the two words. Okay, so these two words, we have one, what was done, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, what was done in the research, or rather in the process. Number two, what were the findings? What was found? After this was done, whatever was done after it was done, what was found? Those are the things that are very key to indicate in an abstract. Then the abstract should also be devoid of jargon and uncommon abbreviations. So all those medical jargons and the uncommon abbreviations. For example, if we talk of abbreviations such as HIV and AIDS, that is something that is very common. It's okay to include that in the abstract. Okay, but if something is very uncommon, it's something that is not even widely accepted, you don't need to include such kind of abbreviations. Okay, so let's look at an example of just briefly an example of an unstructured kind of abstract. So I can see that this abstract, it is one paragraph. Okay, it is just one paragraph. So in this case, it is recommended that an abstract like this one should have a maximum of 120 words. Okay, and then at the bottom there you have the keywords. Then this is an example of a structured abstract. So a structured abstract, it includes, or rather it shows its own introduction. It has its own introduction, the objectives, the methods, the results, and the conclusion. So they are written some sort of subtitles. Okay, that is an example of a structured abstract. So in this case, a structured abstract may have up to about 250 words. So let's look at the keywords. So the keywords, they help identify the subject matter of your article in a search. For example, when you look at several databases. Okay, if you search, the results that are going to come are basically from the keywords that were indicated that are in the manuscript. Okay, now these keywords are coming from are basically coming from two parts. That is from the title. Some of the keywords are coming from the title, while others, an addition of about 3 to 6 words or phrases may come from the rest of the manuscript. Okay, so these keywords are very important, like I've mentioned, in identifying the subject of the article for search. Then they may be listed at the bottom of the abstract. Let me just go to the previous slide. Look at what we have on this particular slide, or rather this example of an abstract. So you can see that the keywords were written at the bottom. Okay. Now, here there may also be need of consulting the specific peer-reviewed journal for their guidelines. So some journals may ask for them at the title page. Others may find them, they may request them to be somewhere else. Okay, so even in this case, you don't need to indicate or rather to include abbreviations. Okay, unless that abbreviation is widely recognized in that particular field. So in conclusion, a good title and abstract attracts the readers, editors, and reviewers' attention. Okay, and keywords are used by major indexing services. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dawin, for the presentation. Thank you so much. Very interesting. So straight we move to any remarks. Anybody has a remark, the person should indicate by raising their hand. But in the meantime, please, Dr. Ori, do you have any remark?
Thank you so much, Zolo. I mean, that was a fantastic presentation by Dawin. He covered most things, all the important things, and I think the most important thing we want to get from this presentation is always read the guide for authors. No matter what you've been taught in school, how you've been taught about writing a scientific paper, forget it. Honestly, throw it away. If you try to use the same way to write manuscripts, then you will find yourself in a very difficult position. Dr. Martina Stipler, a neurosurgeon at Harvard Medical School, coined this term called submitology. And I usually joke with Zolo about submitology. I think before I go ahead, Zolo, can you describe your experience with submitting papers, please?
Thank you very much. Well, it is a whole experience on its own, like it's a whole world on its own, because most not all journals have the same pattern. They don't require the same thing from the authors while submitting journals. For example, like let us take an example of a journal, Frontiers Journal, where when you're submitting a paper there or a manuscript there, you have to, first of all, it's a procedure where you have to be attentive, because the journal tells you what they want you to do. There's a particular way in which you enter the affiliations of the authors. It's a particular way in which you enter the names of the authors. Some might want you to put the first name, then the last name. Others might want you to put the last name, then the first name. There is no universal way of introducing author's name, for example. Then even the affiliation, there's a particular way they want you to put in the affiliation. And when you move on, the format of the manuscript itself, some might need you to submit a PDF, others might need you to submit the document in Word, others might need you to submit both PDF and Word, others might need you even to convert it into another format. And then the figures you have to submit to, the figures involved maybe in the manuscript, there are some specific formats in which they want you to submit it. So it's a whole procedure on its own, and to be sincere with you, it is a highly anxiogenic process, because if you do any mistake, your paper might not even cross the preliminary reviewing procedure, so they might just disqualify your journal. For example, if the journal doesn't want you to structure your abstract, and then you go in and you submit a structured abstract, they will just throw the article. They will not even consider it. If maybe the journal wants your abstract to have 250 words, and then you go and you put 300 words, they will not even consider your work anymore. And then, as I said already, it's dynamic. There is no all fit, if I put that process. So it depends on each journal. So every journal is a whole new process on its own. So that's my experience.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. I just want to hammer the points that Dawin has said everything. I really want to hammer all these things because it is very important. Like really, really important. You need to pay attention to this. The first one I want to hammer on is how you write your name. Be consistent in the way you write your name. People who are not in the those of us from Africa, most of us, and anyway, we tend to write our last name before our first name, right? So someone called, let me take Zolo Ivan. His first name actually is Ivan. His last name is Zolo. And if you submit a paper as Zolo Ivan, what happens is in PubMed will abbreviate your name as Z.Ivan. But Ivan is a first name, so it's difficult to find your papers. And if you're not consistent the way you write your name, what ends up happening is you find it difficult to get recognition for your work. So one thing that let me check a name in the list here, okay, just to give a very specific example. So I see a friend Olaoluwa Ezekiel Dada. Now, first, it's important that Olaoluwa Ezekiel Dada is fixed on what is his first name, what is his middle name, and what is his last name. Because Olaoluwa Ezekiel Dada can be written as Olaoluwa E. Dada, Olaoluwa Dada, Dada Olaoluwa, Dada E. Olaoluwa. If all of those are variations, and the more you do those things, if you come on PubMed then to find an article, then it's difficult, or even on Google Scholar. One way you can go around that, obviously, is to register on ORCID. But so everybody should definitely register on this. We've already spoken about this before. You want to register on ORCID and get a number so that every time you're submitting a paper, you give them your ORCID ID, and this will help you keep track of your papers. So let's take an example from one of the most famous people in neurosurgery, Gazi Yazagio. Now, when we're searching Gazi Yazagio, okay, we find this author, this Yazagio MG. So let me show you what that looks like. If I take MG, I click on that. Right, see what happened. When I wrote Gazi Yazagio, let me go back so you can see what happens. When I wrote Gazi Yazagio, look at the number of articles that came up, 29. This is impossible. Gazi Yazagio has published hundreds of books and chapters. So if you don't write it right and you're searching for him, you get the impression that he didn't do much, right? But when you get the right abbreviation, which is actually Yazagio MG, you find 186. Imagine a master of neurosurgery. You're writing his name the wrong way, and instead of having 186, you have 29 results. That is an issue. So just think about you starting off in research, having maybe 4 or 5 papers, and none of your papers come back return when you're searching your name on PubMed. Not necessarily because you've not done the work, but because you've not been consistent. So very important. And in that same way, whenever a paper is getting submitted, always make sure your name is written in the same way. Always, always, always. Very important. The next thing is a friend of ours asked a question about affiliations. First things first, everyone has an affiliation because everyone belongs to a group. And if we're talking about affiliations, then the affiliation you want to put is you want to put affiliation for the group in which you worked. If you're doing a research project within AFAN, even if you belong to a medical school or you belong to a hospital and everything, your first affiliation in that case should be AFAN, the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons, because it engages the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. And then your other affiliations can come in. Now, in some institutions, they are very strict about you putting affiliations. So they will tell you, for example, if you're going to put an affiliation, we need to read the article before you submit it. So this might happen in some institutions. Just make sure that you have that information right from the get-go. And in the same way, you want to write the affiliations, the same, almost giving the same amount of information every time. Then the next thing I want to give you information about is talking about keywords. How do you come up with keywords? The keywords are very helpful, like Dawin said, to index your paper. So if you want your paper to be properly indexed and found easily, then you want to give it the right keywords. And one way to do that is to use PubMed mesh terms. So as an example, if I were to, you can do a PubMed search of mesh terms. So hold on. So mesh, what mesh does is it has medical subheadings, subject headings. It's still part of PubMed. So let's take head injury. Okay, let's just check head injury. If we check head injury here, what happens is the mesh term here is craniocerebral trauma. And in this mesh term, if we look at the hierarchy, first of all, look at all the words that are put under this term: craniocerebral traumas, craniocerebral head injuries, head trauma. All of these are synonyms, okay? They're all under this mesh term. And this mesh term, craniocerebral trauma, is under trauma to the nervous system. And inside this mesh term, we have brain injuries, CSF leak, post-head injury coma, cranial nerve injuries, and so on and so forth. You can find all of them here. So you can easily come on mesh if you're not sure which keyword to use. You can come on mesh, search an article or search a mesh term, and then look under that mesh term to find what word you can use. That way, it makes it easier for people to find your articles. Because when you do searches, more intricate searches on PubMed, what we use is mesh terms. So you using those mesh terms makes it easier for those working at PubMed to index your articles, and it makes it easier to find. So very important there. And again, another thing that Dawin stressed enough, but I will keep stressing it. What he gave us on how to write a manuscript is very important. Always write your manuscript that way. Always start with the figures and the tables. Always. If you're writing a thesis, an article, any scientific paper, you start with that, because that is the meat of your paper. That is the meat of your work. Start with your tables and figures, because once you've put them, you have an idea of what the key message is in your paper. Then you go ahead and write the methods and materials and methods. Then you write the results, and then you write the discussion. And again, all of this depends on the journal, because materials and methods in one journal will be called materials in another one. In another one, will be called methods. In another one, will be called methodology. And trust me, if you don't use the right term, instead of methods, you write methodology for one journal, or the other way around, they will send back your article. They will send it back. They will not even read it. They will send it back. So you need to be very disciplined, diligent in the way you're coming up with these documents. So be very careful. There's no one rule for everything. So choose the journal and make sure you read through the guidelines. Sorry if I had to stress these things, but it's really important. Thank you once more, Dawin, for going through all of this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ulrich.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ulrich, for your remarks and contribution. So apparently nobody has anything to contribute anymore. So we are going to put an end to this presentation and thank all those who made it to the presentation. We have another webinar next week, still in the scientific writing course. We are going to communicate the poster for next week in our platform. So thank you for coming.